We've all heard of serial killers like Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, and Jeffrey Dahmer. Modern monsters who callously took the lives of innocent victims for no reason beyond their own self-gratification. We've even heard of a number of historical serial killers, such as Jack the Ripper, who terrorized London in the 1800s. But have you ever heard about any serial killers from antiquity or the Middle Ages? Any monsters roaming the streets of ancient Rome or lurking in the alleyways of medieval England? While the term serial killer wasn't coined until around the 1970s, there were undoubtedly serial killers long before this, existing in every culture and society throughout human history. But because of the lack of records and, more frighteningly, means of identifying serial killers in past cultures, there are few, if any, that are known to us today. If bodies started showing up in villages in ancient Rome, for example, they would likely be linked to bandits, unscrupulous soldiers, enemy raids, or even supernatural attacks by werewolves, demons, or vampires, rather than a mass murderer killing at random. It's hard enough for us to identify serial killers in the present day with all of our forensic science, computer technology, and mass CCTV. So imagine the difficulties in identifying them in the past. Of course, we've all heard of vicious and violent pharaohs, emperors, and kings, and even tales of the various soldiers, assassins, and killers working underneath them. But I'm not interested in looking at these sorts of killers in this video. I'm going to avoid tackling political or societal figures who killed with permission or under order, or whose murders were seen as acceptable within the culture of their times. Today, I want to look at individuals operating on the fringes of their historical societies, breaking the laws and conventions of the time, and killing because they have the urge and desire to kill. I want to find the Ted Bundys and the Jack the Rippers who stalked the streets of our ancient ancestors. Inevitably, the people throughout history we know the most about are those in positions of power, so expect to see more from the wealthy elite here. While it's likely that many serial killers from the general populace will have operated throughout human history, the majority of them will have gone unnoticed and unrecorded. So grab a hot drink, get yourself comfortable, and let's embark on a journey together through the corridors of history to look at some of the monsters that preyed on our ancient relatives. Serial killers of the past. Monsters in the shadows of history. The oldest record we have of a serial killer can be found in Greek mythology. Procrust, known as the Stretcher, was claimed to have a house on the side of a busy road where he would welcome passing strangers inside, offering them a warm meal and a comfortable night's rest. If the stranger turned out to be shorter than the iron bed he offered them to sleep in, Procrusts would stretch their bodies with a rack or break it with hammers to stretch them out so they would fit perfectly in the bed. If in contrast they turned out to be too long for the bed, he would chop off their legs instead. As a result, the term Procrustean bed has come to be used to refer to the act of forcing someone or something into anything that is too small or unnatural for them to fit into. As you can imagine, all of the Stretcher's victims died from their injuries. Procrusts ultimately succumbed to the same fate as his victims at the hands of the legendary hero Theseus. But whether any details of this story are anything more, the myth is dubious at best. That said, the fact that this story was told in Greek mythology strongly implies that the ancient Greeks were aware of serial killers. The first recorded case of serial murder outside of mythology that appears to currently be known occurred in 331 BC in the ancient Roman Empire, where local authorities uncovered a murderous plot. Supposedly, a group of unnamed women had conspired together to kill off high-ranking men in the government, with more and more officials falling ill and dying every day. They had planned to use the plague as a cover for their crimes, allowing their murders to go unnoticed. But after capturing one of the responsible women, a plea bargain of sorts was arranged with her, granting her immunity in exchange for her testimony. She revealed that she was part of a group of upper-class women who had plotted to poison a range of upper-class men. After helping them uncover a huge amount of poisons used in these murders, the authorities gathered a group of 25 women involved. Claiming the potions were tonics and not poisons, the court forced the women to drink them to prove they were not harmful, resulting in all of their deaths. Eventually, at least 170 women were convicted of the crimes, but it's hard to specifically call these murders the acts of serial killers without knowing the motives or intentions of those responsible. But that is not the case with our next killer. Our first named and confirmed serial killer comes from all the way back in 144 BC. In the Zhejiang province of China during the Han Dynasty, Liu Pengli, nephew of Emperor Jing of China, was put in charge of Zhejiang, where he wasted no time indulging in his bloodthirsty urges. According to the historian Sima Qian in the records of the great historian, Pengli would regularly organize large groups of slaves and criminals to go on killing sprees with him throughout his own kingdom. He brutalized his populace so horrifically that they soon became too afraid to leave their own homes, amassing a shocking body count in excess of 100 victims. Sima Qian claims that Pengli killed merely for the sport of it, taking pleasure and gratification from his violent actions. While he may be among the wealthy elite, Pengli was acting far outside of the law, and by every definition of the term, was a true serial killer and psychopath. His killing spree went unchecked for decades until finally, the son of one of his victims reported him to Emperor Jing. Swiftly, the emperor forced his lawless cousin to stand trial, with the court demanding he be executed for his shocking crimes. However, unwilling to sentence his own nephew to death, Emperor Jing instead chose to show him mercy, stripping him of all his lands and titles and exiling him for the remainder of his life. It's unknown what happened to Pengli after being exiled, but given the veracity of his crimes, I find it unlikely that he learned his lesson and stopped his murderous rampage. Meanwhile, during the 1st century BC in Sri Lanka, Queen Anula of Anuradhapura gained a reputation for murdering her lovers. Consort of the ruler of Sri Lanka, Choranaga, Anula poisoned him and took control of the kingdom for herself. Though her motives for doing so are unknown, soon after killing him, she married a palace guard called Kuda Tissa, implying she had likely killed him so she could remarry. But just like his predecessor, after 3 years, Anula then poisoned him after taking interest in a different palace guard called Sivya, who she married after his death. Sadly for Sivya, he only lasted for around a year before falling victim to the same fate. She went on to marry a carpenter and a priest who, you guessed it, died from poisoning as she moved on from them too. Determined to maintain her position as ruler, she killed multiple husbands, as well as her own son. While there are potential motives for her actions that breach the criteria mentioned up front, how prolific her actions were make it hard to ignore her position as a historical serial killer. Eventually, the son of one of her victims marched on the palace with an army, capturing Anula and burning her alive on a pyre. She spent 32 years ruling the kingdom before her death. Next up, we're jumping back to ancient Rome, where another twisted individual's actions have led her to being called the first female serial killer in Western history. Locusta of Gaul was a famed poisoner who worked in the service of Empress Agrippina the Younger and Emperor Nero throughout the 1st century in ancient Rome, having initially been captured in Gaul before her talents were discovered and put to use. Locusta killed hundreds of people for her rulers, including the likes of Emperor Claudius and his young son. With Nero himself being a famed bloodthirsty ruler, Locusta was used by him to kill relatives, lovers, and rivals with her concoctions. However, it is not this side of her actions that have enabled her to make this list. Because not only did Locusta murder under order, she murdered purely for pleasure and her own hedonistic enjoyment too. She was known to casually poison slaves simply to show off what her mixtures could do, and was reported to test out her poisons on children to see how effective they were. Emperor Nero was so enamored by her talents that he enlisted her to train more poisoners for him, and openly gave her as many children, slaves, and criminals as she wanted to kill as she pleased. But her relationship with Nero would also be her downfall, having been protected by the psychotic emperor during his reign. Once Nero committed suicide in 68 AD, his successor hastily ordered her to be taken captive. Locusta was then dragged through the streets of Rome like a real-life Cersei Lannister before being executed, ending her reign of terror for good. Only a couple of years later, in 70 AD, a man named Asprinus was charged with murdering 130 dinner guests in Rome, according to Pliny the Elder, though this is only mentioned in passing, so it's once again hard to know if this was an act of serial murder or some sort of horrible food-related accident. Around the same time, several other serial killers were recorded by historians in ancient Rome, though the details about their actions are also lacking. According to Pliny the Elder, a man named Calpurnius Bestia was arrested and charged after having murdered multiple wives by inserting aconite into their vaginas as they slept to poison them. Another killer, Opionicus, was charged with several murders by Cicero, who had accused him of killing his wife, his aunt, his brother's wife, and a number of others. Opionicus fled Rome to avoid the charges, taking up power in an area known as Larinum, where he went on to murder 2 of his own young sons in an agreement with his new wife, and attempted to murder his stepson before being caught, exiled, and ultimately dying. Moving away from ancient Rome, we're jumping over to the Himyarite kingdom, which is in modern-day Yemen in the 5th century. Shenatir, one of the most affluent residents in the kingdom, gained notoriety for his serial murders, according to Muslim historian Ishaq in his book The Life of Muhammad. According to Ishaq, Shenatir had usurped the throne by murdering multiple members of the royal family. But once in power, he began to lure young boys, including princes, to his home with the promise of food and money before he would strip them naked and sexually assault them. After his attacks, he would then throw them out of his window, leaving their dead, naked bodies lying on the ground below. According to Ishak, an intended victim called Nuas was aware of Shenatir's murderous intentions, and so he hid a knife in his shoe before arriving at the house, which he used to thwart his attacker before cutting off his head in an act of brutal retaliation. Jumping forward in time a little bit to the 1400s, we have a true historical serial killer with a disturbingly high body count. Gilles de Rais was a knight and lord from Brittany and a famed companion in arms of Joan of Arc. But outside of his life as a prominent nobleman and war hero, de Rais was supposedly one of the most brutal serial killers of all time, having killed approximately 140 children between 1432 and 1440. For almost a decade, it was claimed that children would vanish near to his castle, with many claiming to see servants disposing of their bodies. But due to his status as a famed nobleman, his despicable acts went unreported. After being arrested during a dispute with a priest, countless witnesses came forward at his trial, claiming de Rais had tortured, sexually assaulted, and murdered hundreds of children, and engaged in acts of cannibalism, necrophilia, and Satanism within his castle. De Rais ultimately confessed to his crimes, and was sentenced to death alongside a number of his associates. However, modern scholars have since thrown doubt on his confession and conviction, viewing him not as one of history's worst serial killers, but as a victim of injustice. It has been argued that he was punished and had his name dragged through the dirt by pro-English judges who wanted to destroy his reputation, and the reputation of Joan of Arc due to their relationship. Whatever the truth, history books tell us that de Rais was a monstrous serial killer. A lot of the cases of serial killers reported around this sort of time have similar difficulties in determining whether there's any truth to them. Peter Stump, the werewolf of Bedburg, for example, is another case we covered in its own video where a man was accused of murdering dozens of men, women, and children due to being a werewolf. While he may have indeed been a serial killer, it is far more likely that he was a scapegoat chosen for political purposes. To find out more about Stump's unusual case, check out the full video up on the channel covering it. In a similar case in France, Gilles Garnier, known as the Werewolf of Dole, confessed to strangling 4 children and eating their flesh. He was supposedly caught in the act, resulting in a trial, a torture-induced confession, and him being burnt at the stake. In another case of an accused werewolf that perhaps holds a little more weight to it, Nicolas Desmont was accused of luring children into his tailor shop in the French city of Chalon, where he would assault them, slit their throats, and eat pieces of their bodies. When searching his shop, the authorities located hundreds of human bones, leading him to confess to the murder of at least 50 children. He was also said to be a werewolf by his accusers, who claimed he hunted for children in the forest too. Though this seems like an obvious exaggeration. Supposedly, his confessions in court were so grotesque that the documents detailing them were ordered to be destroyed before Desmont was sentenced to death and burned alive at the stake. As you can see, the 1500s were flooded with werewolves, witches, and dabblers in the dark arts that could be seen in hindsight as serial killers, with many of the accused having huge body counts. However, it was also a golden age of religious fanaticism, and it feels far more likely that the majority of these cases involved innocent people being used as scapegoats and confessing under torture. The absurdity of many of their confessions, such as Peter Stump claiming that he slept with an incubus and ate the brain of his own son, only increases the likelihood their confessions are false, in my opinion. A similar example would be the cannibal and serial killer Peter Niers, who operated in the Holy Roman Empire, aka Germany, during the 1500s. Niers was a bandit who was documented as heading up a gang who would rob and murder callously across the region. While this side of the story is unquestionably true, with many of his accomplices, and even himself being caught at times, and Niers having gained a notorious reputation, it's less clear whether the crimes he was ultimately linked to are equally as real. After being captured, Niers confessed under torture to being a black magician who would cut the fetuses out of pregnant women to cannibalize them and use the remains in acts of dark magic. He was ultimately convicted of killing 544 victims, 24 of them being fetuses, and was executed on September 16, 1581. While I find it highly unlikely he truly killed 544 individuals, Niers was undoubtedly a ruthless killer who robbed and murdered as he saw fit, for no reason other than that he wanted to. While acts of magic and cannibalism confessed under torture cannot be verified, his position as a historical serial killer can. Another account from the Holy Roman Empire retold in pamphlets from the same time period is that of the disturbing serial killer Christman Genipperteinga. Like Niers, Christman was a bandit who was claimed to have killed nearly 1,000 individuals. Christman operated from a fixed location, utilizing a cave complex that overlooked a busy road where he had constructed a residence featuring rooms, chambers, and even a cellar. He would use this location to prey upon groups of French and German travelers, luring them to his cave before poisoning and robbing them. He was even known to murder his own accomplices so he could keep all of the stolen loot for himself, dumping their bodies into a mine shaft connected to his cave complex. After taking a liking to one of his intended victims, Christman kept her captive in his cave, where he forced her to live with him and have sex with him. He would chain her ankle to prevent her from fleeing when he was busy or out seeking new victims. Christman fathered 6 children with her, but murdered every one of them by strangling them once they were born. Some pamphlets even claimed he would stretch out their bodies and hang them. When the wind made them move, he was said to laugh and remark, "Dance, dear little children," but it would ultimately be this unnamed woman that would lead to his downfall. Allowing her to visit a nearby town, Christman was satisfied that she would not betray him after making a religious oath to him. But upon seeing the children in the town, she broke down, drawing a large crowd. Though initially refusing to tell them what was wrong, the mayor was able to convince her to confess what she knew to him. Revealing Christman's horrific crimes, he was quickly seized in his cave, where the townsfolk found an incredible amount of stolen riches and weapons, as well as a diary Christman had kept, detailing all 906 of the murders he carried out. Showing no remorse, the only thing Christman regretted was failing to reach the 1,000 victim mark. He was condemned to death and tortured for 9 days before dying of internal injuries. However, there is no real consensus on whether the story of Christman is a true story or a conglomerate of several similar real stories, such as that of the bandit Niers mentioned earlier. Moving over to Iceland now, in the late 1500s we find the one and only serial killer recorded in Icelandic history books in the likes of Bjorn Pettersson. Pettersson is believed to have lured in unsuspecting victims to his farmstead with the promise of work and accommodation before brutally murdering them. Suspicions grew around him when locals began to take notice of the amount of people who seemed to vanish around him, while simultaneously he seemed to gain more disposable income and possessions from unknown means. After arresting him, he confessed to murdering 9 people, and authorities soon discovered the bodies of his victims buried at his farm. However, shockingly, they discovered at least another 9 bodies buried at the farm. As a result, he was hanged, dismembered, and had his remains placed on spikes, all while his pregnant wife was forced to watch. A slightly more infamous serial killer from the 1500s comes to us in the form of Countess Elizabeth Bathory of Transylvania. While some have tried to claim she too may have been a victim of political attacks to destroy her power, this seems unlikely given the sheer amount of witnesses, evidence, and physical bodies recorded during her arrest. So notorious, she has gone on to inspire multiple films and fictional characters, normally in association with vampirism. Supposedly, Bathory would bathe in the blood of her young female victims and use their bodies in her dark spells and for witchcraft. She was said to gain pleasure and enjoyment out of torturing and murdering her victims, with an astounding body count of at least 600 victims. Her 11-year killing spree came to an end after a minister complained about her sordid behavior, leading the Minister of Hungary, one of her own relatives, to break into her castle to investigate. Upon entering the castle, his posse came across the dying and dead bodies of more than 600 victims. Arresting her, it was revealed that her servants were complicit in her crimes, scouring villages for young women to bring to her so she could enjoy torturing and killing them. Numerous witnesses, bodies, and pieces of evidence presented led her to confess to her crimes. While many of her servants were executed, Bathory herself suffered a darker punishment. She was bricked into a room within her own castle where she was left to starve and die. Such a famous historical serial killer feels like a good place to close this video. As we've more or less reached the 1600s here, we're just about emerging at a time of far superior record-keeping and reporting, which means there is actually a wealth of historical serial killers over the next 400 years or so before Jack the Ripper comes onto the scene. So rather than make a small dent into that topic, I'm going to save it to cover in a follow-up video to this one. So if you enjoyed this video, and you'd like to see me cover the serial killers of the Renaissance and early modern era, then drop a like and let me know down in the comments section below. There are some really crazy cases in that time span that could be interesting to explore. If there were any cases in this video that you feel like you'd like to see covered in more depth, like the Werewolf of Bedburg video already up on the channel, let me know in the comments too. You have been watching The Mystery Abyss.